Charlotte Bronte, 1816-1855, daughter of a clergyman, lived near Yorkshire moors. She suffered maltreatments in school. Two of her sisters died of tuberculosis. Charlotte and Emily and Anne, the other two sisters, lived in isolation. They wrote poems and later on novels. Jane Eyre is the first and most famous novel. Jane Eyre is an orphan, considered rebel and ungrateful because she cannot stand injustice. Her aunts send her to Lowood School, where girls receive a very hard Victorian education, which stifles their femininity. Jane grows up and goes to work as a governess in Mr. Rochester's mansion. Mr. Rochester is abroad, and Jane leaves her pupil Adele, an orphan, and Mr. Fairfax. Coming back home, Mr. Rochester meets Jane and is struck by her courage and frankness. He falls in love with her, but when they are in church for their marriage, the ceremony is interrupted by a man who says that Mr. Rochester already has a wife. Mr. Rochester tells Jane that he married a rich woman who had just met to please his family. When he discovered she was mad, he locked her in a room of her servants. Sometimes strange laughs coming from there were heard. Mr. Rochester beseeches Jane to remain with him, but Jane, though desperately in love with him, doesn't want to fall into sin. She runs away and comes back only when she learns that Mr. Rochester's wife died after setting fire to the house. Mr. Rochester lost his sight in an attempt to rescue her. Mr. Rochester and Jane are still in love and married. In my opinion, few works have been adapted for a film without spoiling the content and the atmosphere of the novel, as in the case of Jane Eyre. Especially when novels are long, you often have to cut a long story short, and the audience thinks, okay, but the novel is much better. The film looks like the skeleton of the novel. Contents are reduced to main points, and the characters do not clearly reveal their feelings. This does not happen in Jane Eyre, the film where expresses the spirit of the novel. Only Jane's suffering during her flight, when the marriage can't be celebrated, is omitted. The flight can be considered a spiritual experience which fortified Jane. However, the film gives a perfect idea of the contents and of the spirit of the novel. Jane Eyre is a novel focused on women. This work is important in literature owing to the light in which women are viewed, a novelty with respect to the past. Jane is different from other women of the 18th century who accept their role in the Victorian society in which femininity was stifled and women were maltreated. In this novel, two opposite aspects of personality are analyzed in depth. Ellen Burns' angelic spirituality, the good, and Bertha Mason's bestial and violent nature, the evil, going to extremes owing to isolation. Jane is strong and courageous. As a child, she was considered a rebel and was confined in a red room because she could not bear injustice and reacted on impulse. As an adult, conscience helps her to maintain an inner equilibrium. Mr. Rochester, the chief male character of the novel, is proud of his strength. He is ready to help a woman, but wants to keep his predominance. Blindness changes him. He repents of his faults. He feels like a felled oak, and humbly turns to God and gratefully accepts Jane's help. Now they are on an equal footing. They marry and are in love. I chose this novel because love literature, in particular of the English Romanticism. Furthermore, The 19th century is not far away, and therefore we have a better knowledge of the history of this period and can understand the behavior and the life of characters in society. In the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution, in a few years, changed the people's life for the better, but also brought about problems, which are still discussed nowadays, and had a strong social and cultural impact. In a century of great changes, many authors wrote very important novels. Also, Charlotte Bronte introduced an innovation in literature by emphasizing women's potential. In this amazing and interesting novel, readers find an accurate psychological analysis of characters. Ups and downs of life will help them to grow up and to reflect upon their faults. This enables them to do their utmost. In my opinion, somebody who starts reading a 550 pages novel feels relieved, thinking that all well that ends well. After many misfortunes, the hero, or in our case the heroine, will finally find happiness, overcoming difficulties which seemed unsurpassable till the last but one page. This often occurs in novels of the 18th century. One might object that this happens in fairy tales. Unfortunately, life sometimes there is no happy ending. However, that's why we often try to escape daily problems by reading an interesting book. We need to dream and to be optimistic. Jane Eyre is surely an amazing novel. There are some coups de théâtre and a touch of Gothic attracts people who love mystery. Furthermore, Jane is courageous and independent, and these characteristics are new for women of the 18th century. Descriptions of nature are practical and realistic. The blowing of wind and the thought of Jane trying to sleep in the open air on soaked ground gives me the shudders. Readers can't help being moved by this atmosphere. I think these are the reasons why other novels of this kind drew inspiration from Jane Eyre. The most famous of these novels is Rocca by Daphne du Maurier, which was adapted for Rebecca, the first wife, a film by Alfred Hitchcock with Laurence Olivier, which was a hit in 1938. Jane Eyre, a classic of English romanticism, recently acquired a wider popularity also in Italy, owing to the wonderful film by Zeffirelli.